What is up, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Carl. I'm the Consumer Review Lad, and this is the Consumer Review Podcast. I just consumed CSI Vegas Season 1, Episode 1, and I'm going to review it in this podcast. After 2,201 days, we finally have a new episode of CSI. It's also been 2,709 days since we've had a new episode of CSI and a new episode of Survivor on the same day. If you enjoy Survivor, I also review that. You can listen to that review on wherever you listen to his podcast. Just check out Survivor. Season 41, episode 1, 2, and 3 podcasts are available to be reviewed right now. CSI is back. And I just want to do a real quick explanation on how I rate TV shows. I rate them from 1 to 5 stars. So 1 being the lowest, 5 being the highest. That rating comes from 4 different categories. It comes from entertainment, pretty much how entertained was I watching the show. It comes from acting/directing, how good was the acting, story, how good was the storylines on the show, and presentation, which is costumes, music, editing, cinematography, and special effects. Pretty much everything wrapped up, combined, that's presented to us on the TV show. I rate each of those categories from 1 to 5. 1 being absolutely terrible and pretty much unfinished. 1s are extremely rare to give out, as they have to be extremely bad and, like I said, kind of unfinished. And most TV shows are not going to get that bad if they're going to air. So it's going to be very rare I rate anything a 1. 2 is just bad and below average, but it's still passable as a TV show. 3 is average, which is usually some good and some bad. 4 is mostly good, maybe great with some bad, and 5 is the greatest, awesome, just the best. 5s are rare, but not as rare as 1s, and there are many shows that will hit 5 on at least one category, sometimes even every episode in the season, but I've yet to have a TV show that hit 5 on every single category for one episode. I've yet to have a movie hit that also. In an average 5-star rating system, average is probably about 2.5, especially if you can rate something below 1 star. In my rating system, the average would be a 3, since the 1 is the absolute lowest I can give a TV show or movie in my system. But realistically, I'm not going to give many TV shows and movies 1. The lowest most of them will ever really get a 2, which bumps up my average to about a 3.5. So really, in my rating system, below 3 stars is bad. 3 to 3.5 is about average, and 3.5 plus is really good to great. With that being said, let's review CSI Vegas. First off, I'm going to do a non-spoiler review. I gave this episode 2.5 stars. Entertainment got a 3. Overall, I did enjoy watching this episode. Acting was a 2. This is your basic, primetime network TV hour-long drama acting. Sometimes it can be really good, really great, but this is just the basic acting with actually some bad acting mixed in it at parts. Some really wooden lines that I just did not like. So really not great acting. I give it a 2. Story was also a 2. It really seemed like this was a 2-hour episode squashed into a 1-hour time frame. A lot happened this episode. A lot of it doesn't make sense. It was almost a 3 just based off the ending, but I decided on a 2 based off the 40 minutes before that part before the end. Presentation was just a 3. Just an average TV show. Some editing blips here and there. It was almost a 2 because of the editing blips, where it just seemed like the characters were talking and walking, and just the edit just quickly had them in like a different audio, different part of the scene. Wasn't a big fan of that. But what I was a big fan of was some cool transitions between scenes that they did, almost like the island into a skull, I think, at one part in this. So that's what really bumped it up to a 3. So now we're going to go into the spoiler part of this. So if you don't want to be spoiled for CSI Vegas Season 1, Episode 1, do not listen farther. So this CSI episode is really an introduction into 2021 CSI in Vegas. New cast working the CSI scene with some old cast there. To use a wrestling term, this is like putting established wrestling stars in the ring with new wrestlers you're trying to get over. I feel like this is what this season's going to be. You have the old cast that everyone, of course, loves to see on their television. They love that they're back on CSI. And you have this new cast that maybe next season the old cast goes away and it's just this new cast going forward. So this old cast is really just to kind of put over this new cast for the audience. So it starts off with one of the old CSI cast members, Jim Brass, in his house. He's blind now, and there's an intruder in there to kill him. And despite being blind, Jim Brass takes a gun and he shoots the intruder. Of course, he misses some shots because he's blind. And I almost thought was Jim Bass blind at like the end in 2015, but apparently the other CSI cast were kind of surprised too. So this is a new thing for the new audience. I'm gonna be honest. I used to watch CSI back in the day, but I probably haven't seen CSI in over a decade. So some of these storylines I'm kind of lost on. Some of the CSI lore I'm kind of lost on. And with that crime scene with him killing the intruder, that's where we see the new CSI cast. And apparently the intruder was sent there to assassinate Jim. They found some sort of call sign with money by this guy named Lucky. Again, I'm not really too familiar with the CSI lore, so I'm not really sure how big Lucky is there. But that's who was sent to that's who paid someone to go assassinate Jim. Anyways, Sarah comes to visit Brass, and Brass wants her to take on the case. They think they can handle it. So Gil can't come because he's doing some research in the ocean. He's stuck on a boat. We have a new head of the CSI team, and she's okay with Sarah working the case with her, but she can't use a gun until the sheriff approves it. Spoiler alert, I don't think the sheriff approves it this episode. And they pretty much use this segment to show off the new lab. She meets the new cast of CSI. There's a secondary story this episode that I'll just go ahead and get through. It's a pawn shop burning down, and someone in the pawn shop was kind of shot, kind of through the eye. And I pretty much think this whole storyline was just to introduce the Joshua character and about how he like reconstructs crime scenes in this room to help him solve the crime. This mystery was about like a burned gun pile. How did that gun pile get burned? You know, what was the meaning behind it? Who shot him? And we, the viewers, really get very few chances to really solve this mystery. And it's kind of obvious in one scene that kind of had bad acting, in my opinion. That was probably one of his family members. I don't know who those ladies on the couch were. I don't know if it was like his sister, wife, cousin. One of them, it looked like they could have maybe killed the guy, the victim. And it was like in another scene they showed us that, yeah, it was a family matter, and they brought the suspect to the crime scene and saying that, you know, she did it because she was injured and she had this big walking boot on, and there's this big walking boot prints over in the crime scene where the person would have stood when he shot the victim. Her friend says, like I said, I don't know, her friend, cousin, I'm sure they introduced who the characters are, but I guess it slipped past me. But she was telling her to say that she didn't do it. And another cop's like, yes, say you didn't do it. But she couldn't say it. She didn't say it. So she got arrested. So that little storyline was completely solved. And like I said, as a viewers, I don't think we got too many of chances, because when it really came to like really talking about who the suspects could be, it was pretty obvious that, okay, it was probably one of these two. And then it came back. I was like, yeah, it was one of these two. And this is why. So what happened was she was selling illegal guns. The guy at the pawn shop, the victim, didn't like her doing that, so he like threw them and was like smelting all of them together. And so she shot him with a crossbow, and then she burned the place down. That was pretty much that storyline there. The main mystery of the show is about this Lucky dude who was going after Jim. You know, Maxine, who's a new CSI lead, she got a box delivered with a head of a former missing girl and a note saying that Jim was first. They use their new CSI methods to track stuff and end up finding the rest of the girl's body and some cash. And they realize the person who killed her died years ago, and he was like locked up for killing another murder. So it was not the original Lucky who's doing this new sending people to assassinate Jim Brass. It's someone impersonating Lucky. And this new Lucky, he actually ends up kidnapping this female cop in the middle of the Vegas Strip. We don't see how he did it. It's like one moment she's walking and there's like a crowd of people and he walks up behind her. And then the next moment he's closing the trunk on her being bound up and she's clearly awake. So we don't even see how this guy ended up taking down this police officer, but somehow he ended up doing it, and she's a missing person. And they think she's missing because she had some sort of relation to the Jim Brass case. They have a counterfeit dollar bill that this guy tipped a waitress with. Instead of pulling prints off, Maxine says, "Hold my Red Bull." She's going to pull DNA off this dollar bill that will give you a profile of the suspect, what he looks like. And the profile they receive is it's a white, blonde, blue-eyed 5'3" man. And the guy who kidnapped her, of course, is a criminal, so they're wanting to find him and get the cop back. And then Sarah goes to the Vegas Strip, and Sarah ends up confronting the 5'3" guy. He talks to her, and she takes out her phone, and she calls the CSI office. Instead of calling 911, she calls the CSI office. And I guess he doesn't like that she has her phone. So I guess if he was going to harm her, he decided he's going to just harm her later. And he just takes off and starts running. So, of course, she chases after him through traffic. He takes his car and he drives off. She takes out her phone and takes pictures of the car. And next thing you know, they find the car outside of a house based off the license plates. The cops and SWAT, they're in the house. There's no sign of the guy. But Maxine, she realizes something's off. She said, check the crawl space. He was in the crawl space with the former cop. They interrogate him. He keeps saying CSI plants evidence on people to lock them up. They find a letter at his house they found him at, and that letter mentions a storage locker. So at the storage locker with no camera, which they mention, they find a CSI lab and evidence from former cases believed to belong to David Hodge, an old CSI member. And the lab was pretty much showing that David Hodge was faking evidence to set up to get these people arrested. Sarah said that can't be possible. If this gets out and Hodge is doing this or he's found guilty, all the prisoners we locked up for the past 15 seasons will be released. So the CSI team, they need to figure out who's behind it. They need to clear David Hodges' name, say that he didn't plant this fake evidence and lock these people up. And how are they going to do that? Well, Gil makes his return and he says they will do it based off the evidence pretty much. Like I said, I was entertained watching this. The acting was subpar, almost probably your basic hour-long TV drama acting, but maybe worse than average because, like I said, I gave it a 2. Storylines were all over the place, and it was kind of rushed. I really felt like this could have been a 2-hour episode. That secondary storyline with the pawn shop burning down, they really didn't give viewers kind of a chance to really be that invested in the whodunit. It was more just about the character and how he solves cases. The first one with Lucky was all over the place about how he was kind of after Sarah in Vegas, and then she pulled out her phone, so he ran, but he attacked a cop in broad daylight who had a radio on her, I believe. So that doesn't make sense. They got his license plate. They hunted down the house. It does kind of make sense in the end when you think about that. This guy was almost a setup to find that storage unit. So the CSI team could find that storage unit to find that supposedly David Hodge was setting up all these fake evidence to lock these people up. And because of that, they can take it to court and all those prisoners could be free. So that's the main storyline here. Someone did, I guess, set up the Lucky guy, the 5'3" guy, to the CSI team so they could find that storage unit. And we'll just have to see where it goes from here. We have a long-term storyline. I'm sure we're going to have some short-term stories each episode. I guess there's like 2 cases they try to solve each episode. Hopefully they give the viewers a chance to actually like solve the cases a little bit more, to see a little bit more than one suspect. Like I said, overall, the presentation was average. There was cool transition shots, but bad editing at times. Besides the storyline being all over the place, I was entertained. Acting was subpar. Overall, it was 2.5 stars. So like I told you earlier, 3 to 3.5 is about average in my rating system. This is below average. So this is a slightly below average episode of TV. I'd love to know what you think. Tweet me at consume_review. If you're watching this on YouTube, leave a comment down below. If you're watching this on YouTube and you enjoyed the podcast, click like. If you did enjoy the podcast, please subscribe. You might enjoy a future podcast. Anyways, my name is Carl. I'm the Consume and Review Lad, and this has been the Consume and Review podcast for CSI Vegas, Season 1, Episode 1. Peace out.